the experience felt like a wrestling. Like I was being drawn in to what he was saying. But logically, I'm like, this is dumb. I've heard it all before. You just, must be something you ate. You know what I mean? They must have poisoned the punch or whatever. Like, why are you being captivated by this? You know this story. It's silly. You know, this is me arguing in my mind, but I'm being drawn into what he's saying.
Hi guys, this is Lindsay with TestifyCafe.com, and we're here with Oscar Navarro from Living Waters, and we're going to discuss his testimony. What is your testimony? How did God bring you to the knowledge of your sin and trust in him?
That's a big one. By the way, Testify Cafe is such a rad name. I feel like it's like kind of gangster, like Testify Cafe. Anyways, that has nothing to do with my story. Yeah, how did he bring me to a knowledge of his saving faith? So I did not grow up in a Christian home. I had no religious affiliation or background. We didn't, you know, like here in Orange County, California, it was Christianized when I grew up. So many people would maybe go to church Easter, Christmas, Mother's Day, like the big three. We didn't even do that. Matter of fact, I have a very specific memory. Somewhere between first and third grade, I'm on the playground and kids are asking what religion you are. And like we're going in a circle and it's like Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Christian. And it gets to me and I had no idea what those words were. Like I had no concept of God or faith or anything of that nature. My mom got pregnant when she was 15 and she was 16 when she had me. I was told that my biological father left 2 weeks before my first birthday. And my mom, she struggled with addiction her whole life. And so she had a number of ex-husbands that were very abusive. The first one that I remember was sexually abusive towards me from the age of 5 till about 12. Probably a little bit younger than that, but nonetheless for quite a while. And then the next ex-husband that she had was physically abusive to myself, to my mom, and then to my, I have triplet sisters, to my 3 sisters. He was very physically and verbally abusive. So it's weird to call them stepdads because none of them ever had an interest of being my father. Like I have another memory where at her wedding day to the physically abusive one, we're in Vegas. That's where you go to have cheap, quick weddings. We're in Vegas and it's at the kind of the wedding party, the after party type thing, you know, and I hear somebody ask him, hey, who's that kid, pointing at me? And his response was, that's Becky's son. My mom's name is Becky. You know, that stands out to you because it's not like I'm not his stepson. He's not my father. That's Becky's son. I was always kind of a bolt-on to my mom's life. At 13, I actually got kicked out of my mom's house. Again, that abusive stepdad, him and I got into a physical altercation and he had like pushed me through a door and we were, I mean, you can't really call it a fight because I'm 13 and he's like this ex-gang member, like, you know, gym rat kind of guy. So he's beating on me and my mom comes into the room. She starts yelling at him. They start yelling at each other. And I kind of escape from underneath him and go call the police. Now this is actually the first time I'd ever kind of tried to fight back. It's funny, I have these memories. I have these memories of being a little kid in a bedroom and hearing him like be physical with my mom in the other room and being so afraid to do something about it that I would just sit there. And sadly, as a little kid, I had a lot of shame and guilt, like I'm supposed to protect my mom, you know? Yeah, so this was like kind of the first time where I wanted to try to stand up to him. And now I'm in the living room, I'm dialing 911 and the argument comes into the living room and he notices I'm on the phone with the police and he had a background, he had been arrested before. So he's not fond of the police showing up and he tells my mom, you know, if the cops come, either you need to kick Oscar out or I'm leaving. And at 13, like, when you hear that, I'm celebrating. Let's go, you're gone. Like, there's no idea in your brain that there's another option, because it's mom. You know, as much as you struggled with addiction, as little of a mothering experience I had, like, you still just have this confidence that mom's mom. And so I hung up the phone and my mom said, pack your bags, you're leaving. So at 13, I went to go move in with my grandma. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment condo. I slept on her couch, and that was in my 8th grade year, just before high school. Now, I feel like I have to preface by saying I wasn't like a picture perfect kid. I had been kicked out of 3 different schools for fighting. Like, I'd never gotten any drugs, I'd never stolen anything, but I just had this very anti-authority mindset. And I think a part of it was my upbringing. Like, I never had a parent to tell me when to go to school, when not to go to school. My attendance record was terrible through elementary and middle school. I pulled it, actually. I went, because they're still on file, you know. I was kind of curious about, like, young Oscar, and I pulled it, and it's bad. Like, I'm straight F's with a D, and it was like never attended. And I remember waking up and like I'd go to school when I was bored, you know? So no sense of authority, and that caused quite a bit of trouble. I moved in with my grandma just before high school started. And through high school, I lived with her for 2 years, freshman and sophomore year, and our relationship struggled. She, God bless her, if she hadn't taken me in, I'd have been homeless. But she also struggled with bipolar. Yeah. And I'm this punk kid with no authoritative, like, no background of people telling me what to do. And now we're living in this 1-bedroom condo, you know, that's less than 700 square feet, maybe, I don't know. And there's just constant conflict. At the end of the summer between freshman and sophomore year, me and a group of friends started reading white papers on atheism, Marxism, things like that. French atheism specifically, which led into some thoughts on Marxism, and we self-declared ourselves atheists. Summer between freshman and sophomore year of high school. And shortly after that, this is pre 9/11, so atheism was very different back then. It wasn't pop culture the way it is today. Post 9/11 is when, like, Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and those guys really started to gain popularity. At that time, their books weren't as readily available, but there was online forums, and that was kind of like a gathering place, for atheists. And so we spent a lot of our time in there, and I started, you know, declaring myself a militant atheist, which is a phrase Christopher Hitchens kind of coined. I remember the first time we heard about Christian students made a plan on a Wednesday morning to like show up at school early and pray under the American flag for the school. And I was like, let's go have this conversation with these people. You know, it was kind of like the first time I was gonna apply the things I was thinking to a conversation I was gonna have with a Christian. And so we showed up early and like got into a debate with them. These poor kids, like, they're not trained apologists or evangelists. They're just like trying to pray for their school, and we show up like a bunch of jerks. I don't know if I can say that word on your podcast. Like a bunch of jerks arguing with them. And so my grandma ended up kicking me out at the end of sophomore year of high school. So I was 15, and that was it. I was on my own after that. I rented a room from somebody off Craigslist, like, because you can't put your name on you can't sign a lease. So like I just went on Craigslist, found some stranger. He was a hoarder. So I rented a room from a hoarder at 15 years old, got a job, got saved money, bought a car, and I never wanted to be poor. I grew up poor, never wanted to be poor, and so I just knew I didn't care what, I didn't have like a dream of what I wanted to do. I just wanted to make a lot of money. And I knew education was gonna be important for that, so I put myself through continuation school, and then took college courses when I was done with high school. And worked, and took care of myself. So fast forward, none of that really matters. So I met this girl. Her dad was a former pastor at a church, and when I met her, she was going to a Christian school, but she was questioning her faith. And sadly, by the last time I saw her, she had like a huge Marxist tattoo on her ribs. She had denounced her faith. She had left the school she was going to. But while we were dating, I think she was interested because I was introducing her to new ideas. I was interested because she was curious about these new ideas. And while we were together, we went to church twice. Neither of us wanted to go. The first one was, there was a lot of conflict between us and her parents because she was dating an atheist. But this one time, her dad was going to speak at like the church that he had formerly worked at, and it was kind of one of those, like, we didn't want to go, but they were inviting us. They were going to go out to dinner afterwards as a family, and so we kind of went to keep the peace as a peace offering type thing. And man, I remember like it was yesterday, the experience, and I thought it was weird, and I hated every moment of it. I remember them passing an offering plate, and me thinking, here's why we're really here, tax-free income, you know? He gets up, and at one point he asks everybody to pray, and he's like, bow your heads, and I'm like, bow my head to what? I'm not gonna bow my head, Him and I make eye contact, and he kind of has this look on his face like, you're not gonna bow your head? And I probably had a look on my face like, I'm not bowing my head, which at the moment made me feel like, yeah, stick it to the man. But now as a dad with 2 girls, I can't imagine, what he felt like in that moment. So the whole thing ends, and we got to dinner, and I'm grumbling about the experience and whatnot. And so a couple months later, kind of a similar conversation. Someone's getting baptized. Neither of us want to go, but it's a family event. There's gonna be dinner afterwards. Let's go to keep the peace, And I was told, like, at least there won't be a sermon. So we show up, and there's a sermon, as there should be. And mind you, I knew the gospel. Like, I could probably articulate the gospel better than most Christians at that time. That's not me speaking arrogantly or pridefully. I think a lot of Christians don't know how to articulate the gospel. I understood the substitutionary atonement. I just thought it was barbaric. And so my point in saying that is that I heard the gospel that night, but it wasn't the first time. It wasn't the most clear example of the gospel. He wasn't a particularly good communicator, and he did not provide any arguments that I didn't already hear. There was nothing special about the content or delivery of the gospel presentation that I was hearing. Just got up and faithfully preached. And as he was preaching, I remember the experience felt like a wrestling. Like I was being drawn in to what he was saying. But logically, I'm like, this is dumb. I've heard it all before. You just must be something you ate. You know what I mean? They must have poisoned the punch or whatever. Like, why are you being captivated by this? You know this story. It's silly. This is me arguing in my mind, but I'm being drawn into what he's saying. And at the end of his sermon, he says simply, everyone bow your heads. And without thinking, I'm bowing my head. And he says, if you want me to pray for you, he doesn't say it like a prayer of salvation. It was very open-ended. It was just simply, if you want me to pray for you, look at me. That's it. That's all you got to do is look at me. And I remember in my head thinking, no way. I am not looking up. There's no chance I'm looking up. And I really don't have a theology for what happens next. I can't explain it beyond just telling you what the experience was like. And it was like somebody whispered, look up. I dare you to look up. And so I look up, and the dude was like waiting for me to look at him. Like he was already making eye contact with me, And he just says, okay, thank you, this is for you, and he prays. And I got saved that night. Like I physically remember it. My salvation was a physical experience. I felt the Holy Spirit come into my life. But I didn't have language for it. And I was too prideful to say anything to anybody. We always hear like, I'm saved. And I was like, I was done, and I was like, what was that? Surely I can't be a Christian. Like because I'm just so dumb and stubborn, I don't know. But I didn't tell the guy that something amazing happened. I didn't tell the girl I was with. I didn't tell anybody. I left that night. A few weeks later, me and that girl ended up breaking up. And I spent the next year of my life trying to live the same old life, the same, what we Christians would call a worldly experience. I'd go out and meet a girl. I'd go out with the guys. I'd do trips, here and there. And all of these things that I saw, the money I was making, the experience that I was having, before they were satisfying in a worldly kind of way. Yeah. But now all of a sudden I'd come home and I'd feel wretched. I felt like a dog returning to vomit. And I spent a year trying to live the way I used to live before. And finally, it was a Wednesday night to Thursday morning, I wake up. It was a night out with the guys. And, from a worldly standard, it was a great night. But I wake up depressed. And I'm like, something changed a year ago. And I got to figure out what it was, because this is not working. So I called the only Christian I knew. I should say I called the only Christian that was in my phone. It was a cousin of mine. He actually worked at a church, or he volunteered there, whatever the case. And I don't say anything to him. It's Thursday morning. He answers the phone, and I'm like, when do you go to church? And he goes, well, Thursdays and Sundays. Thursdays is this college group I go to. What time? 7 o'clock. Where? Gives me the address. All right, I'll be there. I don't say anything else. He thinks I'm going to protest. So he gets a couple of
flagpole.
Yeah, he gets a couple of guys together and is like, my cousin's coming. He's an atheist. He's going to cause a scene. We got to meet him out front of the church and love on him, but like probably not let him in because he might be disruptive. This is kind of the conversation he's having with these guys. And I show up waving the white flag. I'm like, I'm just here to observe and listen. And that was the beginning of a year or two of me, by the grace of God, being discipled. And for some people, in some ways, my salvation was immediate, for sure. The justification happened that night, but the sanctifying process was delayed because of my pride, whatever you want to call it. And then it was this process of like really unwinding my way of thinking. I just thought backwards about so many things. Like I remember there being a moment where I was like, okay, there's a God, but it can't be the Christian God, and I'd start reading about other religions and faiths. And I remember another moment where I was like, man, I'm a Christian, but I don't even like Christians or Christian music. Again, I just needed sanctifying, And so anyways, over the course of 2 years, the Lord really just did an amazing work in my life through mentors and reading books. Like scales were falling off. I started to see the world and myself and people in a very, very different way. And by the grace of God, that didn't stop. I'll circle back to just one more thing, which is how I like to end the testimony part of when people ask me the story, which is fast forward, I get married, 3 kids, and my wife, she's like, haven't you ever wanted to find your biological father? And I truly, I had no desire in me. I remember when I first realized I was a Christian, people would say like, oh, well, you're God is your father in heaven. And I would joke like, well, yeah, but he didn't teach me how to throw a football or shave or pay bills. And a mentor was like, no, pray and ask the Lord to show you how he is your father. And I can tell you, the Lord has filled that gap. I don't have this dad-shaped hole in my life, I was satisfied in the Lord as my father. And so this idea of reaching out to my biological father didn't make any sense to me. And one day I'm talking to a friend and he points out that most dads who abandon their kids walk around every single day with shame and guilt. And there's often not a day that goes by where that dad doesn't think about the son or daughter that they don't have in their life. Mm-hmm. And he pointed out to me the opportunity to preach the gospel in the midst of that. And I thought to myself, man, I've been thinking about this all wrong. I've been thinking I have nothing to gain in finding my father, but he might have something to gain in it. Mm-hmm. The opportunity to preach the gospel in that. Mm-hmm. So I used a program and ended up finding him. He lives 45 minutes away from me. And so, we're gonna meet at what I call Switzerland Mutual Ground Starbucks. So we have this plan. I'm like, I'm gonna get there early. I'm gonna find my seat. I'm gonna be like positioned in the corner. I'm gonna control the room. You know what I mean? I got all these plans in my head. I pull up, I get out of my car, and before I even close the door, I hear Oscar. I turn around, and this big old dude just gives me a huge hug, and he's already weeping. And with him, he has pictures of me and him up until I was 4 years old. So as you remember, I was told he left 2 weeks before my first birthday.
Yeah.
It turns out he was actually around until I was 4, and it was my mom and the sexual abuser that kind of pushed him out. They changed phone numbers, they wouldn't answer calls and letters, and he didn't grow up here. He's from Mexico, and so he didn't kind of know how to legally navigate that. And over time, you know, he lost communication with me, and he got remarried. Him and his wife spent a couple years trying to look for me and never could find me. And so he invites me over to his house, and they've got like pictures of me there. They've got this calendar where they mark my birthday every year and remember how old I am. I've got 2 younger brothers, and they were like, to them, I was like the prodigal son that they were waiting to come home. They were like, man, we talk about you with our neighbors and our friends, and we'd sit around Christmas and wonder what you're doing and hoping one day you'd be here with us. Like, they were this family that was just waiting for me, you know? And my brother asked me to officiate his wedding. And at his wedding, I remember my dad, at the reception, like every corner I turned, he'd grab me, throw his arms around me, and introduce me to someone and be like, this is my son. Have you met my son? And I tell that story because it's a cool story about reconciliation with my lost earthly father. But as C.S. Lewis says, every good story is a great story because it reminds us of the greatest story ever told, the story of the gospel, which is that in Christ we have a Father in heaven, that his arms are around us saying, this is my son, this is my daughter.